You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Clothes for Chiro, Legacy Wealth Management, Posture Screen, Chiro Thin, Imaging Services, Zingit Solutions, Peter Goldman's Zone School of Healing, Everest Coaching Systems, Universal Tractioning Systems, Rhino Coaching, Chiropractic Jobs Online, and Chiro Matchmakers. Let's hustle.
All right, guys, we're on episode 78 of Chiro Hustle. I'm Luke. Here's Jim.
Hey, everybody. So today we had the opportunity to interview Anik St. Martin. She will be featured in our film project Patient. But before we get into this episode, if you want to know more about pediatric style practice and certainty in practice, stay tuned. So Dr. Anik, tell us about your chiropractic story. What influenced you to become a chiropractor?
Well, I grew up in a sort of really, I guess you could call it traditional French-Canadian culture. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, and French Canadians are pretty, at least back then, at least in my family, were pretty nonchalant about healthcare in general, and about there was never much talk or conversation or attention placed on quality of health, and certainly never any conversations about how does a person come to thrive or reach their potential or any of that, right? I just grew up very much as a sort of tomboy. I was an only child, and the people I hung out with on weekends were my cousins, and they were all boys and all slightly older, and so I grew up really active, but getting injured a lot. I, crashed into trees on snowmobiles. I had a near-death experience falling into a large ravine while driving this little UTV sort of machine that had run out of brakes and fell, several dozens of feet down, and ended up with the thing landing on me. I was 10, and I fell off roofs and just sort of repeatedly got hurt. And back then, my grandma would basically give me a cup of milk and put me in a hot bathtub. And if I could walk when I came out, an hour later, everything was deemed fine. Right? So, so by the time I was 12 or 13, I had a lot of low back pain, and I danced a lot at the time. It was sort of my thing. I never played sports, but I grew up dancing. And by the time I was in ninth grade, I was in a performing arts school where I was required to dance like 3-4 hours a day, and got to the point where I would miss several hours, several days a week of dance classes because of my low back pain. And my parents at the time, on and off saw a chiropractor, but it was never really mentioned for me. Just like even now, there's this assumption or this sort of paradigm where the conversation in terms on a global scale, in terms of adjusting kids, doesn't really come up unless it's done directly, between two people who really know about chiropractic. And so I just took painkillers, Advil and Tylenol, and was never even guided in that sense. And so I just kind of did what I could. And by the time I was in 10th grade, I having grown up in the same sort of hometown for the first 13, 14 years of my life, my parents decided that they were tired of living in the cold Canadian winters, and sat me down at the end of my 9th grade to tell me that they were going to follow through with their sort of lifelong dream of never again living through another Canadian winter, and we were going to be moving to Florida, to Fort Lauderdale. And so we spent the summer basically selling all of our stuff, including our house. And in August, we got on a plane with a few suitcases and basically took a flight from Ottawa to Fort Lauderdale, and landed and rented a condo. And now we were living in Fort Lauderdale. And about 2 weeks later, I started school at this private Catholic high school a few, blocks away from the beach, where everybody was either a blonde debutante or a surfer, or basically I felt like I was in an alien world, right? And have grown up French. I barely, I spoke some English, but very little, and felt really uncomfortable with the language. And here I was, the new 10th grader who barely spoke English with the dark hair, and just really didn't fit in. And I think that stress that happened immediately basically kind of tipped the scales for me. And so, I very much believe that people, as they go through life, they sort of accumulate layers, onion, through the different forms of stress. They accumulate the layers of the onion that eventually comes to represent our nervous system. And of course, our nervous system is so responsible for how we interpret our environment, that here I was suddenly a 15-year-old kid with no self-confidence and all of this sudden, slow stress over time, but suddenly this sort of bucket spilling drop of stress being in a completely different environment where all of a sudden my health fell apart. I just suddenly had, significant allergies where I was taking Claritin and Saldane and all of that stuff as much as I possibly could because I couldn't breathe. My eyes were itchy and I was miserable. And people would say things to me like, oh yeah, you live in a different area now. You're in Florida and the grasses here, they're terrible, right? And at the time that totally made sense to me. And now, of course, I look at it and I'm like, that's so ridiculous. Why could you take 10 people to Florida and 7 of them, wouldn't be able to breathe and the other 3 would be fine? And collectively and culturally, we blame it on the grass, But at the time that made sense to me. And so Saldane and all of this stuff that felt like it was out of my control. And then I started having some sort of something that would probably now be diagnosed as like a chronic fatigue type syndrome. And I think looking back on it now, my nervous system was just completely stressed and obviously very much interfered with. And so I would come home from school and I would go to bed. My parents would wake me up. I'd have dinner, go back to bed, wake up the next morning and do it again. My parents obviously were super worried. And so they took me to see a doctor while we were there. And the doctor was very nice, but never, touched me in any way, never really did an exam, and immediately diagnosed me with being depressed, which I don't know. I mean, I was certainly stressed, but I remember he wrote a prescription for Prozac, and I was in the car on the way home with my mom, and I remember thinking and to myself, like, wait a second, I'm not depressed. I'm just, not feeling well. Yeah, I'm stressed, but I'm not feeling good. And so I started taking it. We filled it. I started taking it, and I was on it only for a couple of days because it literally turned me into a zombie. I would be, unknowingly drooling, sitting in class. And luckily, I think I had the sense, and my parents certainly had the sense to be like, well, this is bullshit, really. This is obviously not the answer. And so a few months went by, I became fluent in English, and I made friends, and I spent the next 3 years in Florida and thriving in terms of socially and academically, but still taking allergy meds. The major stresses were gone, but here I was on allergy meds and pain meds for my low back, and I had horrible PMS. I would take Midol every month, and all this stuff. And along the way, I'd somehow developed autoimmune issue where I had really severe psoriasis. So I was taking steroids and putting steroids on my skin and not functioning well. And somewhere along the way, my parents started seeing a chiropractor in Pompano Beach, at the neighboring town of Fort Lauderdale, and she was amazing. I eventually, actually, years later, did a sort of preceptorship with her. And my parents would go in and get adjusted, and she would ask them, about their family, kids, this, that, which is what any great chiropractor does, I think. And my parents would express concern, like, yeah, our daughter's doing really well, things are going great, except for A, B, C, D, and E. And she would say, well, she should definitely come in and have a chiropractic checkup. And despite the fact that my parents had been adjusted on and off, never so much for wellness, but they'd been to the chiropractor on and off all my life. They would come home and tell me, Dr. Paula really thinks that you should have a chiropractic checkup. This is around the time where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And I had taken the SATs, and I decided I wanted to go to med school. I had this dream. I wanted to be a cardiologist. And I had, at this point, gotten into a pre-med program back in my hometown in Ottawa at the University of Ottawa. So I was going to go do this pre-med program in biology. Somewhere along the way, not from my parents, but maybe from the culture, or I'm not sure, I'd made up my mind that chiropractors were quacks, and I was never going to go see one. And so despite my parents trying to get me into Dr. Paula, I just wasn't going to go. And so I graduated high school, still not functioning well, still taking drugs every day, and ended up in an undergrad program back in my hometown. My parents stayed in Florida, so I would show up for class every day, and at this point I'm taking everything I was taking before, and I'm taking the equivalent of speed in the form of no-dos because I have no energy whatsoever. And somewhere in the middle of my first year of university, I came to be friends with a guy whose dad was a chiropractor. And, I would just kind of quietly observe and quietly listen to him, and he was just an absolutely lovely man. He was one of those people that I was always meant to meet. And months into my relationship with this guy, Peter, we're having dinner one night, and he says, basically in front of his dad and in front of his whole family, he says, "Dad, guess what? Anik's going to come see you on Monday." And I'm sitting there going, I don't want to tell the guy I think he's, a witch doctor, but I'm feeling uncomfortable. I guess I'll go in. I'll see what he says, right? And here I am at this point, completely, very, very much medical paradigm, very sick. I go to his office on the Monday, and he takes x-rays, does an exam, and just tells me the chiropractic story very eloquently. And it was like getting hit on the head, right? Because it made more sense than anything I'd ever heard. So I went back in the next day, and he adjusted me for the first time, and I spent the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college getting adjusted several times a week. And a few weeks into my sophomore year, I'm getting ready, and I'm brushing my teeth one morning, getting ready for school, and I realize that I'm completely bent over in the sink, as you do, brushing your teeth, which seems like nothing, but for me, I hadn't been able to bend that way because of my low back for years, probably since I was 14. And here I was now like 19, 20. And so I kind of, stood up and realized that I hadn't taken no-dos, and I hadn't taken allergy meds, and I hadn't taken Midol, and I had more energy. And even though I could have never verbalized it, I very much realized that all those layers of the onion that had accumulated over all those years to make up what my nervous system was experiencing up until a few months before that had been peeled back, was kind of back to myself, right? Back to who I was meant to be. And so I immediately realized that that's obviously exactly what I needed to do, and went to the part of my university that helps you with your life plan, the counselors, I guess you could say. And I very dramatically went in there. I'm pretty sure I still had toothpaste on my face, like it was dramatic, and told them I needed to change my life plan, and they needed to help me figure out how do I get into chiropractic school, and what is this. And I remember they looked at me like I was crazy. And it's funny because I knew at that moment, I had a feeling like, whoa, this isn't the first time I'm going to get that look. And I didn't care. Somehow that felt super empowering for me, and it kind of almost reiterated, I've always been kind of maybe a little off the fringe in terms of the way I do things, and I completely identified with everything about it. And so that was the beginning of the end, basically. I quit what I was doing. I even changed my undergrad major, and then ended up at York Chiropractic College, where I met Darin, my husband, and who's got a pretty similar story. It's interesting. And then we moved out west once we graduated, and the rest is history. We've been here for 18 years.
So tell us a little bit about the style of practice that you run and how it might be different from some other clinics.
I think what makes us unique is that we've always, there are so many different opportunities that come along when you're in practice, especially as your practice is growing, and we're a higher volume practice, and we're in a smaller community, and so it's I guess maybe it sticks out a little more than it would in a big sphere. And I think what makes us unique, we practice, it's a family practice. We see everyone, right? Like I see a lot of kids, mostly kids and pregnant women and just families all day long. And Darin sees a lot of athletes and people who've been injured, and he's really, really good with older people. And then we have two associates who, between all of us, we really adjust everyone and anyone, very much with the focus being on family wellness. Eventually that's the outcome. People bring in their kids and they eventually come in for wellness, and then they get pregnant and they get adjusted through that. And having done it for 18 years, it's pretty cool to see the shift, like little kids that we used to adjust are now in college and they're still getting adjusted, and they eventually get married, and then their spouses start getting adjusted, and they have babies, and babies get adjusted. Some of them are in chiropractic school now, and it's really quite inspiring. But I think what makes us unique is that we've always been extremely clear about how we want our practice to run. There are so many different opportunities that walk in the door in terms of opportunities maybe to make more money, or to expand the practice in a certain way, or to think, and they're all opportunities that might be really great for others, that other people would thrive with. But Darin and I have always been really clear about the fact that simple is better for us. And so we only do a few things, chiropractic being the primary one. It's pretty much in our current building here, because we also have the building next door to ours. In our current building, we only adjust. And what we know is that that's one of the only things we do really, really well. And knowing that, we've decided that that's all we really want to do in terms of in the practice. We do things personally outside of the practice. I do a lot of speaking and things like that I really love. But as far as how we run our practice, we know what we do well, and that helps us not get lost and not dilute our product. I think a lot of people can do that and do it well in terms of many different things in practice, but we're aware of the fact that we don't operate well that way. And so it becomes clear when people walk in the door, what they're here for is extremely clear, because it's only chiropractic.
Yeah, I think what you've done is really cool. And when you have a definition of what you want to do, and, being a practitioner almost 2 decades, I'm sure you've seen a lot of opportunities to stray off of the chiropractic path. But I think it's really cool to see that you developed such a strong pediatric practice, and that you've learned how to work with your husband as well. So I think that what you've done is really unique and really awesome. And like you said, being in a smaller marketplace but with a higher volume also represents a unique situation with what you guys do. So that's also, I think, really dynamic. And it was cool for Luke and I both to be able to come out there and see you in action and see the dynamics of the practice, and meet Darin and yourself, and seeing the families that you take care of. So it was really nice for us to be able to get like a sneak peek into the day in the life of you as a chiropractor.
Oh, that's great.
And you obviously have some type of commitment to yourself with your headspace, and to be able to get yourself prepared to be a caregiver. Are there any type of quotes or mantras that you kind of follow to help you keep your momentum as a chiropractor?
There are, there are probably several, but I think what I'm thankful for, that I was kind of born with, is this natural sense of enthusiasm, And it's not just it's obviously for chiropractic. It's what I think makes us good chiropractors, when you're enthusiastic about what you do. But I think naturally, personality-wise, it's just kind of how I'm made. I'm always enthused about what I'm doing, what I'm reading, what I'm eating. Like, it's easy for me to find that. It just comes sort of naturally. And so when things get maybe, say, stressful, or I get distracted, or sometimes, a lot of the times in situations, people think that, maybe, people will say things like, you're so lucky, and yes, I am, we're fortunate, things are awesome. It's not always a big bowl of cherries, right? I mean, sometimes there are some days where it's kind of like you're trying to find the cherries maybe in the big bowl of whatever else. And so I think what helps bring me back on track is definitely the idea that of what Gandhi said when he said, be the change you want to see. It doesn't matter what people around you are saying or doing, or what the culture, in what direction the culture's heading. Of course, globally it matters, but for you personally, I think the best way that we can make a change is to lead by example. And I think that that's a huge reminder for me. And I try, even with my family, I have teenagers and they're in public school, they're exposed to all different sorts of things. And anytime that I see them kind of question or get stressed about certain things or even get down, I think it's important to remember that, to just kind of, look, you're not going to change other people. The only person you can really make sure is doing things the way that you can identify with in terms of integrity and living the life that you think you should be living, is by doing it yourself. And ideally, if you're doing it and you're really living it and you're leading by example, other people are naturally going to ideally become elevated by that. And so it's such a simple thing and it's so cliche, but I think that that's really all we have to worry about, is doing the best job we possibly can. And in that change, ideally, it creates a ripple effect. I also like the idea, our primary core value for our practice is we ignite the spark. And I think that resonates for us, for chiropractors, because ideally, obviously, that's what the adjustment does. It ignites the spark to the nervous system, to people's potential, to so many different things. But I think in practice, too, we have such a big responsibility to ignite people, to give them hope, because they're coming in a lot of times being told, that there should be no hope. And even kids, right? Like, there are so many contradictions. Kids are coming in and parents have them on different types of drugs because they really feel like their children's potential is limited, because that's what they've been told. They don't want to feel that way. It's against, their inherent hope and belief system for their kids, but they've been told by teachers and doctors and the culture that their children's potential, for whatever reason, is interfered with naturally, born that way, that there's an issue, right? Whether it's an ADHD or a health condition or asthma or a sleep disorder or enlarged tonsils or whatever. I think it falls on us to really let people know that their kids were born with all the potential they need, and that it's contradictory to let the kids know that their potential can't be actuated. And so I think our job is very much to ignite the spark that way too, to let people know that we believe otherwise and we know that we can help them. And the second you tell someone that, I think those are the most important words you can tell someone, is, I know I can help you. Because at that point, there's an entire shift that happens, because they're not told that anywhere else. And so igniting the spark is a big quote that really does create a lot of momentum all over the place.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Clothes for Chiro, Legacy Wealth Management, Posture Screen, Chiro Thin, Imaging Services, Zingit Solutions, Peter Goldman's Zone School of Healing, Everest Coaching Systems, Universal Tractioning Systems, Rhino Coaching, Chiropractic Jobs Online, and Chiro Matchmakers. Let's hustle.
So how do you think the world would change if everyone started getting their kids adjusted from an early age?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the whole planet would vibrate at a different level. I think that it's a thing that I feel like I can visualize, but that's also difficult to visualize. I think obviously people wouldn't take, as many drugs. People would be a lot happier. People would be much, much healthier. Immune systems would thrive. Family dynamics would be better. There'd be, less depression. We'd be more productive. The whole planet would change. I think, I think that there needs to be a really extremely large paradigm and cultural shift in order for that to happen. It's something that I'd love to see.
Yeah, I think the whole world would just completely change for the better, and I hope we see that someday.
I hope so too.
So the way things are going right now, where do you see the chiropractic profession winding up in the next 20 years?
I feel like it depends on where I look, to be honest. I think it depends on our certainty as a profession. I think our message needs to be certain. Some of the people I talk to, or the groups of people I listen to, seem to be really uncertain about the power of what we do. But not just the power of what we do, the power of who we are, because sometimes I think we take for granted that we are just thought leaders. We're natural thought leaders because we don't think like others. And there's so much power in that. And if we just were certain enough to be able to tell the story collectively, I think that the sky's the limit. And if we could also eliminate contradictions, sometimes when you look around in the chiropractic world in terms of how people are selling the chiropractic story, there are a lot of contradictions, which at the same time, that's sort of what we love, right, is the fact that we're all different. We're not robots. But I think that all we need is a little bit more inspiration and enthusiasm, and absolutely more certainty in the power of the adjustment. I think that if that can happen 20 years from now, I think we could see, ideally, a 4, 5, 6-fold in the number of people who get adjusted. It's up to us, right? It's not the culture. It's up to us to change the way we feel about what we're doing, and to have the guts to be able to tell everyone.
And I agree with you, Nick. As I've gotten more involved with the chiropractic profession, I think that the reason that Luke and I are such avid supporters of chiropractic is we do know that there needs to be consistency for the message in the marketplace. And we do know that what chiropractors do is something very unique, and it's non-duplicatable without a chiropractor. So the chiropractor is essential. And, there is a certain type of unity that needs to be consistent in order for chiropractors to stay as a chiropractic team. And I think that as chiropractic develops, the team's mentality as a whole, as a profession, needs to develop better. And I do think that what chiropractors can do is really advance the quality of life for people. And I think that most people, as they become more educated with the information age, they want to have more resources, and they want to be able to know what they do and why they do it. And I think chiropractic, when it comes to the healthcare paradigm, it, like happened to you, it just started making sense. It started making sense when somebody sat down and told you the story and said, by getting adjusted, your nervous system's going to function better and your body's going to heal better. And I think that's what it's just going to have to take, Nick, is more people that are consistently telling the message. That's why what we do with Chiro Hustle, keeping free speech and chiropractic alive, with, not losing our relationship with the philosophy of chiropractic, talking about these deep things like innate intelligence. And for those of you that don't really understand innate, that probably are listening to this as an educational moment, if you cut yourself, just for instance, you don't have to look at your finger and tell your finger to heal. It's more of a, your body is going to heal naturally because that's your innate inside of you. You're born with that. So it's like you're the computer that's born inside of you, if you will, if talking more modern times. But also, Nick, we need to all take in consideration universal intelligence and the real philosophy that chiropractic was born into, that most of the people that are practicing today are so far away from that old school philosophy that they do look at it as mechanism, and they do look at it as a mechanistic approach that lives inside of the medical realm. But chiropractic was always a standalone profession. And I think that that's where chiropractors need to go back to if they want to keep chiropractic pure and free as we develop over the next 20 years.
Exactly. I think our message needs to be a lot more polarizing. I find that, as the years have gone by, the more, and I don't want to say the louder in terms of in an aggressive way, but the louder that I've become about the chiropractic message, at least in my community, the more polarizing that message has become. And people, you find your tribe, right? And the people who walk in the door, they then have an expectation that we're going to tell them the truth. It's not going to be wishy-washy. It's not going to be what they're hearing everywhere else. We're not trying to be, we're not pretending to be. We're not walking around with stethoscopes around our necks. We're chiropractors, and we're telling them. And there are a lot of people looking for what we're offering. We just have to tell them what it is that we do. And if we are unclear about that, then it's confusing. And what's that saying, right? Confused minds don't buy. And so the clear people. It's amazing to me how sometimes people walk in, even from the medical paradigm. Whether I just had a new patient. He's just retired as a psychiatric nurse. This guy, he's on 5 Percocets a day. He's doing all of these things that in order to deal with this crazy chronic pain that he's got. And my paradigm and my story is so completely off the path of anything he's ever heard before, that it took him a few days to kind of mull it over. And then he came back in and he was excited because he realizes, in a sense, that he's heading down a broken path. And if we're not there to tell that guy that, then who is, right? Because everywhere else he goes, he's just going to get whatever he's already done is just going to get reinforced. And we know it's not working. All we need to do is look at the state of our health in this country. Our paradigm isn't working, and people know it, right? It's kind of like this idea that we collectively know that the fire is dying, and parents know it too. And all we need to do is kind of bring in that little spark of something that catches their attention, where the second they walk in the door, they're like, whoa, wait a second, this place is different. This is different. I think I'm going to pay attention. And the moment they decide to do that, if you're telling your story correctly, that's it. That's all they need. They'll be patients for life, I think.
I think so too. And, as you have this conversation with us, it just even more makes sense that we keep on creating production to, meet people where they are and have a cultural conversation with people that isn't doctor talk to patient talk. And I think that
Exactly.
as we develop a communication paradigm, the way that chiropractors used to think that they had to talk to their patient base has developed. And I think that the conversation of how people take care of their families and kids with chiropractic has developed. So even in the past couple years, the conversation of how people think of a medical model or a medical industry, chiropractic is becoming ever more relevant because people are waking up, like you've said, and they're looking for that solution to their family's health crisis. Like even the thing that you dealt with growing up as a teenager and thinking that you were actually sick when your body just wasn't firing the way it was supposed to.
Exactly. And I think that, as parents, just talking to so many parents, kids are coming in, they're on Zantac, they're on Ritalin, they're on, you name it. They're on skin drugs, they're on asthma drugs, they're on behavior drugs, they're on sleep meds, they're on steroids. And anytime you ask a parent, how do you feel about your child having to be on this drug? Nobody identifies well with that, right? No parent likes the idea of their child's body not functioning optimally. And so the second you offer them that information, what if there was a way to optimize function? Then all of a sudden, of course, every parent in the world, that's all they want for their kids is to thrive. And the second that I think collectively we can agree that we all have the propensity to thrive. We all have that in us. And the conversation should then be about, how do we kind of uncover that? And I'm always wondering, why aren't we having these conversations culturally? Why aren't they having these conversations in schools or when you go in for your child checkup, right? Why aren't we being asked, how do you find your child's well-being is? Do you think that your child's potential is being optimized? It sounds like crazy conversations, but these are the conversations parents want to have. And kids want to have them too. And here we are completely equipped to have those. All we need to do is make sure we're delivering the goods. And that's the easy part.
And Nick, that's why we asked that question, because in 20 years from now, the kids that you're taking care of will be having kids. And it's going to be a whole different world for them in 20 years as to where chiropractic plays into that paradigm. And I think that when we think about in 20 years, the kids that you're taking care of today will be moms and dads. What does it look like for their kids? And I think as the generation jumps and we start, thinking 10, 20 years down the line, I think that chiropractic has a firm positioning within being that solution, like we've talked about a couple times, but it is something that's going to grow. So, I guess in 39 years of practice, your career is going to see, the generation of kids that you're taking care of right now be adults.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. I love it. I love it. But when we talk about kids too, though, I think it's also really important to take care of the kids coming out of chiropractic school. That's my other thing, right? I feel like when we're hiring associates, we have the responsibility and the ability to shape chiropractic for that person. I just did a talk a few nights ago, and in the audience, I didn't even know, but there was a chiropractor who is he's doing a preceptorship with a doctor who doesn't practice too far from me. And the kid came up to me afterward, and he has been doing this preceptorship since January. He's waiting on his licensure. He just graduated. And the kid has already sort of lost a little bit of hope, and definitely didn't have much excitement, and was almost in tears when he was like, I was listening to you talk, and I'm not hearing this in the practice I'm working in. And he goes, and I'm not trying to badmouth anyone, but I don't know that I'm in the right place. And there was just so much confusion for this poor kid. And I think that is a big part of it too. We don't want, it falls on us, right? To take care of the young people who are just coming out of school, the ones who do want to become associates, to take care of them properly and to elevate them as much as we possibly can and to inspire them, because it's going to be up to them pretty soon.
Well, I think honestly, Nick, what you said there is full circle, and the elephant in the room is the schools. And I think that's the part that nobody really wants to talk about, is how are they producing the future chiropractors, and how are the future chiropractors coming out of the schools. And as we go down the rabbit hole even deeper, the schools are taking chiropractic out of chiropractic. So there's a bigger concern there for not only the leaders that are out there taking the preceptorships and teaching, there's also the people that are producing these chiropractors that are going to be the future leaders in the profession as well. And where's their headspace when they are coming out of these schools that might not be teaching philosophy the right way, or might not be giving the confidence for taking care of people like real chiropractors do with the adjustment. So I think that there's the big elephant in the room still that needs to be a further line of conversation, maybe not on this podcast episode, but it's definitely something that people need to start thinking about as maybe they develop their own thoughts about where chiropractic is going.
Absolutely. And encouraging, I have so many kids who are thinking about going into chiropractic as a profession right now, really, really guiding them, taking the time, to mentor them and guiding them in the direction. school-wise becomes really important too.
So how do you get so many families to come through your door for care? What are some of your favorite marketing strategies on getting new patients?
For me, it's always we do some social media marketing and some, definitely do some of that stuff very steadily. I'm lucky to have most of the members of my team be younger than myself, and so they're much more savvy, and I kind of let them run with that. To be honest, it's something that they've created based on classes and some outreach that we've helped provide, but they kind of run with it and have fun with it, which is really good. So they're constantly interacting with our community through Facebook and Instagram, and we know that there's a whole incredible world there, right? And we also are really adamant about the quality of our website. We're just in the middle of having our website completely redone. I kept looking at our website going, gosh, I'm bored looking at this, right? People would come in and they'd say, well, we liked your website the most, and be like, really? In my mind, really, you do? And so really came to terms with, okay, I'm going to have to really put some work into this, and we're redoing our website completely where it can be much more interactive, where we're creating all of these community outreach that then brings people back to our website in various ways, where they can then learn about chiropractic, but also our office and what we have to offer. But primarily, since the beginning for me personally, it's been being out in the community doing talks. I love it. Most of the time, especially now, right, in the beginning, it was all about like, oh gosh, I'm going to go do some talks. I'd like to get some new patients, and now my thinking is completely different. It's much more like, okay, new patients need us. We just need to let them know where we are. And that's a lot of the purpose of the talks, but beyond that, I think changing paradigms as a whole, right? Inspiring people and changing paradigms and really feeling invested in your community enough to show up, on a Wednesday at 6:30 to talk about something like the power of your language on your life experience, or stress, or things that really can inspire them to make changes. And then 2 years down the road, they come to another lecture, and then once they decide that chiropractic is for them, then of course you're the ones they end up coming to. So creating a lifelong relationship with your community that way, I think, is really important too.
So do you think that some of your positioning on how you've developed your stance has changed by maturity, being a practitioner, or do you think that most chiropractors come right out of school and they look at that type of marketing strategy the same way you do?
No, I think it does come with time, and that's frustrating for me, because I feel like it would be so amazing to be able to teach somebody who's coming out of school just the certainty of that. Right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the moment the certainty piece switched, where I really, really understood chiropractic as being like, there's no doubt in my mind, right? Like I understand chiropractic. As soon as that switched, everything changed. The question is like, how do you impart that on someone? How do you invoke this feeling of confidence and certainty and inspiration to be able to want to tell everyone about chiropractic, not just to be like, oh, I have to go do another screening, but to find your voice in a way that excites you and to be able to deliver it that way. I don't know how you do that.
Well, obviously it happens with running a successful practice and seeing the ebbs and flows of getting a business off the ground, and making it through that 5-year period where 50% of chiropractors fail and still thriving throughout that. And I think finding your stride after that 5-year point might be that benchmark for when I think a chiropractor actually feels certain about their successful practice, not only taking care of people, but running a business. And I think that might be something to discover as we talk to more people, but there has to be that coming of age moment in a chiropractor's career when they build that certainty to know that they are a cornerstone to their community, and that people can trust them for the goods that they deliver, like you said earlier. And I think when people realize that they're delivering the goods and they have become successful in life and in practice, that is, a certain coming of age moment for a chiropractor in their career to build that certainty. Like, I don't have to go talk at this event to get new patients. I have to go deliver the message to the people that need to hear it, and that will, by large, get me more new patients long term.
Exactly. And that at some point there's a shift. But also, I think, with the younger people, I think that there's a fear or there's an apprehension about hard work, maybe. I think that there needs to be a shift mentally in terms of hard work, like embracing the suck a little bit, I think becomes really important too, I think that there's nothing wrong with hard work, and there's nothing wrong with the hustle of it. In fact, that's the fun part, right? That's the part that really sets you apart. And so in my community, the fact that Darin and I, we play really hard, but we also work really hard. People know that about us, and they know that we work hard because we love what we do. We're committed. And in a roundabout way, people come to know, I think, that, these guys are really hard. They're the real deal. They work hard because they believe in what they do,
Well, I think also that's the perception that you want as a leader in your community too for people's healthcare challenges and needs, is you do want to present yourself as an authority. And when people see you at the grocery store, they walk down the aisle and they're like, hey, there's that awesome chiropractor that takes care of all these families in our community.
Exactly, where you're at the grocery store and you get stopped 22 times with people asking questions about, which prop you think is better for, that sort of thing. I love that.
So what kind of things do you like to do in your spare time? Do you like to listen, read books? Do you have hobbies? What do you like to do?
Well, I think I spend, if I break it down in terms of time spent on stuff, primarily I really love to cook. I spend a lot of time. So when I'm home, I'm in the kitchen all the time. I really like making everything, from scratch, and it's kind of how I take care of my family, I guess, and my friends. I just really, really love to cook, and it's important to me. And it's also my downtime. And so while I'm cooking, we don't have cable television, we don't watch TV, but if I'm going to watch something, it might be while I'm cooking. I listen to podcasts while I'm cooking. I watch a lot of TED Talks, and so I kind of integrate, a bunch of stuff that way. I really like to run, and so I run and I do yoga and I swim every week, and so that kind of, cross-training sort of stuff, mostly so that I can really do what I ultimately love, which is just surf and ski. And so on the weekends, that's typically what we're doing, is surfing and skiing. And as far as books, I read. I'm not a reader where I'll be like, it's Sunday, I'm just going to cuddle up on the couch and read, because I'm kind of a mover and a doer, but I read every day, and for me, that's at night for about an hour before I go to bed.
Have you ever been surfing with Billy DeMoss?
Not yet. He messaged me not that long ago talking about that trip to Indonesia that they're taking on some yacht. I don't know. I think I don't think I'm that good of a surfer yet. I'm not sure I'll ever be that good of a surfer. But the thing about surfing is it doesn't really matter. It's so amazing no matter where you are. I kind of have this little thought flash that I want to take some time off and take my family, to southern South America and spend a few months really devoted to surfing. And I'd love to write a book about it from, a 45-year-old mom's perspective. So yeah, I do. I dream about it quite a bit.
Well, we're starting to get to the tail end of our interview today. What are some website links or social media links where people can find out more about you?
Well, our website, which is still under construction but not for long, is myadvantagechiro.com. And we are on Facebook, Advantage Chiropractic in Longview. And yeah, the website is going to have everything else, kind of a link to some of my talks and some of my blogs and all of those things once it's set up. So
Awesome. Was there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't ask you about?
I don't think so. I think you guys did a great job.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Anik, and it's been really an honor to get to know you over the past couple years and coming out there, actually visiting your practice and, meeting Darin and seeing you guys out on the chiropractic scene. So thank you for being our friend in chiropractic.
And also thank you for letting us do a segment on you in our film Project Patient, which should be coming out someday soon.
Well, I'm really excited for you guys. You guys are awesome. Keep the hustle going. You're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for some of your time today, and we'll see you soon, okay?
That sounds great. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.